Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of Bespoke Endurance Podcast. I'm Josh, and sitting alongside me as always is my buddy Greg.
Hey.
And we are two dudes who absolutely love cycling, but we're on a journey transforming from what we consider recreational cyclists to racers. So we are being coached by an elite cyclist, our good buddy, Coach Derek. But we're not pros. We're working full time. We're married. We have kids. Life is busy. Maybe you're like us. Maybe you love cycling. Maybe you're super competitive. Maybe you just want to level up and get better. Hey, this podcast is for you, right? We want you to hit that subscribe button. We want you to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We are doing daily training videos along with other videos, so be sure to catch us there. And we just wanted to say real quick, just a quick shout out to Road ID. Yes. We appreciate them so much for allowing us to be able to host our podcast here. Edward and team has been amazing. And if you haven't yet, please go check out roadid.com. These bracelets are incredible. It's kind of like wearing a seatbelt. Why wouldn't you wear a seatbelt in a car? And if you're an athlete, why wouldn't you be rocking a Road ID bracelet? So
Absolutely. So I'm really excited about this episode because normally in the podcast, what we do or what we're aiming to do is to cover a few topics. One is always going to be the training that Josh and I are doing. There's going to be a lot of overlap, even though we have different goals. A lot of the same races we're doing. We're on similar training plans, coached by the same guy. At times there's overlap, at times there's not. So I'm really excited to get into that. So we'll be doing that every week along with other topics. Some type of topic, VO2 max, threshold, training in the morning, winter, outside, inside training. You put in the show notes Fat Max. I don't even know what that is, but I'm gonna
we're gonna get into it.
I think what you're gonna find in this podcast is I just kind of show up and it's just, what do I do? Go do this. Okay, coach. And I just go do it. I don't really ask a ton of questions. And so I feel like you're going to be able to explain things to me, and I'm just kind of learning along with the audience.
Hey, we're learning together.
But we also do want to have a question and answer session too. So we really do want you as the audience to be interactive with us on YouTube in the comment section.
Yep.
And then we do look at those. We try to reply to those. We got one comment last week on the first one,
That's
but
right.
we didn't reply only because we knew the guy, so we texted him like, "Oh, thanks, Peter." So Thank you, Peter, for commenting on
Shout out to Peter.
on that. But for this episode, so last week's episode, we kind of had my story and how I got into cycling and all that, and now I want to hear how you got into this crazy sport and kind of your background and your kind of build up to where we are now, and so. I'm really excited to hear your story. The first thing I want to ask you is, were you always, as far as growing up as a kid, were you always into endurance sports? Were you like a typical American sport kid, or how did you get into endurance sports?
Yeah, didn't start out with endurance sports at a young age, but was definitely into baseball and football. So for me, from playing those at an early age, that's where just that natural competitive side was really developed. I also think part of it was being a middle child, AKA the forgotten child. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and my brother, who's 2 years older than me, was always, just naturally, he was bigger, stronger, faster. And so I was always competing with my brother and trying to be good like my brother, right? He played baseball, football, so I really mirrored a lot of things that he did.
What's the age gap? You might have said it.
2 years.
2 years, okay.
Yep,
sorry.
So he's 2 years older. And I think that's where at a really young age, that just kind of naturally tapped into my competitive side, right? But in a really fun way. I love sports. It was always this fun, you're pushing yourself to get better, to try and get onto that varsity team, right? And so that was really my growing up, childhood, all the way through high school. But then, in college, I had a buddy who, he was into cycling, and I caught the bug. It was one of those things to where I ended up getting, right after college, it was my first year of being married, I ended up getting my first road bike. And it was a 2007 Specialized Sequoia. This thing was a triple crank set. And it was great. I mean, this thing was such a unique bike at the time because I bought the triple crankset. I did very little research, but the only thing I knew is that the triple crankset, I could climb a little bit of hills without too much challenge, and just fell in love with it, you know?
I don't know that model of the Specialized, because like we're both Specialized guys. We'll get into that. What's the Sequoia? Is that like was that like an old endurance bike? Or?
Old endurance bike, yeah.
So they don't.
It's like
they discontinued that, correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, because their endurance now is like they do the Roubaix.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people are now getting the Crux.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sequoia.
Yep.
Okay.
Old school Sequoia.
We'll throw a picture up on the screen.
Yeah.
For sure.
But really for me, I just, for a long time, it was more of like I would do these events like the Tour de Scottsdale, Tour de Tucson, and then eventually I joined this group that rode Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's called this Hour Power. Super fun group. Bunch of these guys that just, had really great bikes, but I was the guy who'd show up and just, I wouldn't ride a ton, and so I would always get destroyed by these guys. I was this young kid. These guys were a little bit older, but they just, had really nice bikes, and I would always get dropped. And so it was kind of a funny joke. Eventually, I upgraded my bike to like a felt. It was my first like aluminum, true kind of little bit more of that, like, hey, I invested a little bit of money in this, and it was just one of those things that just truly loved even that bike, but it just felt so good knowing that, like, oh, I could finally keep up with these guys. This was like a bike that really helped me get to that next point.
What was the jump for you from the Sequoia to the felt? Because the Sequoia sounds like a pretty entry level.
Yeah. And
I think compared to what you're on now, you look at the felt as.
Yeah, the felt is like, to me, that was like the dinosaur, now having the, tarmac SL7. But the biggest jump for me was really going from the, it was the triple crankset to the compact was like a shift for me. Okay. But then even just having better, I jumped up to whatever the Sequoias were. I can't remember what the Shimano, I can't remember what the gearing was, but going from that to the felt where it had the 105s, that felt a world of
like
difference.
Like a Claris or Sora?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It might have been
one
Claris.
Of their Claris is like their super entry level.
Yeah.
Like that's on my wife's bike.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
I truly don't remember.
So it was the gears you noticed?
Yeah.
Nothing as far as ride quality or weight of the bike or anything like that?
Weight-wise, no. I didn't notice like a crazy difference. But I just remember that bike, for me, the biggest jump was just that, like, this bike was better designed to be, more to be faster, right? Okay. So this was that type of bike that really helped me kind of elevate my like cycling just in that simple capacity. Just the bike was designed to be a faster bike than the other one. So it was fun, but I kind of fast forward a couple of years where it was like in 2018 it was one of these really it was honestly one of the like hardest years of my life. I just had a lot going on personally. But it was funny because I ended up signing up for an Olympic triathlon. And so it was one of those things to where I just remember I was like, because I would cycle enough to where it was only like a 25-mile bike. And it was like, I was like, oh, the bike's going to be fine. I didn't train at all for this thing, for the run or the swim. And so really
you did a try and you were only cycling.
Yeah.
And you showed up to a try.
Yeah. And it was one of those to where I think anybody who's gone through something like who experiences something really, truly difficult in their life can understand that like there's something inside of you that kind of shifts. And so I was looking for something to kind of get, an outlet into. And so I signed up for this event, and I remember on the run, because it was like a 6.2-ish mile run. Like the swim is okay.
It's like a 10K run, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's, I just remember on the run feeling like, this is an absolute mistake to not train for this. And so I had just like, and it was like a fun event. It was a type 2 event for me.
Yeah.
It was one of those where I look back and I was like, yeah, I had fun. But in the moment, I remember I was like, this is absolutely miserable. I should have trained for this event.
How long did the 10K take you?
I don't remember because I blocked it out of my memory in terms of time because it was awful. It was so bad.
It's funny. I remember
I probably ran like a 10, 11 minute pace, somewhere in that range.
I remember years ago, did you ever see the magazine Runner's World?
Yeah.
In high school, I used to we used to get those when we were running. And I remember reading this article and it was saying when you have a good race, you can remember all these things that happen. You can almost play out the whole race in your mind.
Yeah.
But when you have a bad race, it's like you can't recall any of the details. So when I ask you, like, what did you run? You're like, I don't even remember. I'm like, that sounds about right.
It was also pre-Strava, so that didn't help. I wasn't
so
on Strava at
what
that
you're
point.
saying is it really didn't happen.
Yeah, it never happened. So it
If
was
it's
one
not
of
on
those-
Strava, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. But yeah, I think for me, one of the things that it was always kind of like just cycling, recreational, did it for fun, didn't do anything with the tri afterwards, which is kind of funny. But then, so fast forward a couple years, in late 2022, something just kind of changed to me. And I remember being on the bike out in like this group ride, and I just remember thinking, I was like, you know what, I'm just kind of bored. I just feel like I'm just itching to do something more than just like group rides, right? Than just like, hey, we're going on a ride on Saturday, which is always great, right? But it's more of that, like, I was always intrigued by the guys that raced. It was always something to where I kind of had this itch and desire to be like, you know what, man, I feel like I'd want to do that. I'd want to get into something like that. And so for me, one thing about me is if I like jump into something, I'll go just fully in. So I'm an all or nothing type of guy. And I think one of the things that was, I just remember thinking, I was like, you know what, I've got some buddies that are runners, and I would run occasionally with them, just kind of for fun. And I always felt horrible afterwards because I would run once or twice a year and be like, I don't get this, But it's like, yeah, because you've only ran like once this year.
Right.
Of course it's going to be miserable. But I remember around that time where I was like, you know what would be crazy to do is like, I've always had this idea of like, it'd be kind of cool to do like a full Ironman. So naturally I just signed up for a full Ironman.
Right. Hang on. I'm trying to piece this together. Okay, so 2018,
Yep.
You're riding with this fast group.
Yep.
And circumstances in life are challenging, so you hit an early midlife crisis and
Yep.
decide, I'm just going to do a triathlon,
Yep.
which you don't train for.
Yep.
And then you kind of check that box and you're like, okay, I've kind of scratched that itch. I'm good. And then 4 years later, you're like, no, I think I'll go back into that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think part of it was like the combination of like, well, I've run a couple of times and maybe I can like combine my running and actually train for an event, like unlike my Olympic tri, tapping into that idea of like, man, I love it. Honestly, around this time was when I signed up for that. It was the first time I've truly understand what it means to actually train for something. The first time that I actually felt like I was like, oh man, like I actually have to like figure out how to become a good runner. I actually have to figure out like, how do I actually like get better as a cyclist?
Were you figuring this out on your own? Were you seeking out a coach of some kind?
Yeah, not at that. I was doing pretty much, I was trying to read books. I was trying to look at different like, kind of those, some of those very generic plans that are out there in terms of, there's tons of them out there, like Ironman plans from.
So you're just ingesting anything you can get your hands on for going from just a one sport athlete to a triathlete.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me was really, I think that the thing that was really interesting was going from, or understanding how good or how long it takes to become really good at even one sport, right? So like runners who've been running since high school or even, previously like you, where it's like, and if you just kept running, it's like, there's such an advantage to all the time that you've built up as a runner for many, many years as compared to somebody who's just getting into running, who maybe like is relatively fit on the bike, but then when you get them on the run, it's like, yeah, you might be pretty slow and you don't have this long history of running.
You have years and years of a base built up. Yes.
Yeah.
So even if you take some time off, you can relatively get back into it. Not necessarily with ease, but your body is more attuned than picking it up and doing one triathlon 4 years ago and then barely running.
Exactly. And I just remember, so it was the first time I bought my first triathlon bike, and this was, I tell you what, this thing changed the game for me.
What was it?
So it was a 2015 Trek Speed Concept 7.5. Still have it. It's an amazing bike. I got it where I had a pretty good deal on it. But I tell you what, man, that thing opened my eyes up to any triathletes who are out there can understand this really well, where it's like there is such a difference of a triathlon bike on flats versus just a typical road bike, right? Even like the best, fastest road bikes out there, you get on a triathlon bike and you hit the flats, that thing feels like just a race car. You just go and you're just like, oh my word, this thing is just designed to be incredibly fast. Now, hills are quite a different story, but on flats,
they're pretty heavy.
Yes.
Heavier.
Yeah.
When this is funny because like you're saying this and I'm like, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Because I've done some training rides with you when you were training for some of your tries.
Yep.
And you bring the tri bike out and you're like, I'm doing these intervals. But my favorite was I think this was 2 years ago. Derek and I were riding down to Maysville.
Oh, yeah.
So from
I remember that.
Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Maysville, and back, it's about 120, 130 miles down and back. It's just down Route 8. There's this amazing coffee shop down there.
Yep.
And you were like, yeah, I'll tag along for a little bit. And you brought the tri bike.
Yep.
And you just sat on the front and pulled us for 30, 40 miles.
Yep.
And then you had to turn around and head back. But I just remember I think you were doing like a zone 2. Like you weren't.
I was tempoing for sure.
You weren't killing it. You weren't threshold. Because you were like, I got to turn around. I got to get back on my own. And we just coasted.
Yeah.
And we were going like 22, 24. Yeah. I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. Like we're doing no work. Josh has just brought the rocket ship bike.
Just the rocket, yeah. I mean, honestly, that bike, anybody who's never gotten on a triathlon bike, even it's worth just getting on one and going just for a long flat ride. That thing feels amazing. So it truly like shifted to me from when I was thinking about like in terms of triathlons, it made it that much more interesting to me because I'm like, it was like what you were talking about where it's like I had to train for the bike. To me, it was like this bike is designed so fast. I felt like I had to like respect the bike that I'm like, I can't go slow on this thing, right? Like I can't be pulling an average speed on this. I have to cruise on this. So I think what was fun was like, to me, it was around that time where thankfully I signed up for a half Ironman before my full Ironman. So I signed up for
as part of just the way to get to transition to the preparation for the full Chattanooga Ironman in 2023 in the fall. I gave myself about a year. I signed up for this thing and I was like, all right, I'm gonna give myself a year to train for this. And then I signed up for a half Ironman right around the summer. So it was almost like close to about the halfway, a little longer than halfway. But I signed up for this Huntington, Indiana, and it was so much fun. It was, just obviously half the distances of the full, but it was one of those things to where I just had such a fun experience that I was like, man, I'm really excited for this full Ironman in Chattanooga. And that just, to me, was one of those experiences where it just inspired me to keep training and keep trying to improve. And then when it came time to do the full Ironman in Chattanooga, I felt so ready. I was just locked in because at that point it took me so long with anybody who's ever done a triathlon. Swimming is, if you don't have a background in swimming, form takes a while to get to that place to where you feel really comfortable in the water. And then once you get your form dialed in, like you're always going to keep tweaking and improving it, even the pros do. But once you get that relatively dialed in, then you can start actually swimming with some speed. How long did it take you to get that dialed?
Oh, I would say probably 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And 3 to 4 months, is that every day? Is that how many times a week are you in water? Is it a pool? Is it open water?
Yeah, usually at least 3 times a week. As it got more,
is that a gym now?
This is the gym. Yep.
Okay.
So I was doing a gym, the 25-meter pool. And I mean, it's one of those things that I look back and, not doing tries now, but it's like looking back, it's like, I really don't miss swimming in a gym because it's just like, it does get pretty boring. Even when you're doing interval work and you're kind of changing up the workout, you hit a wall so quick. You literally tap the wall so quickly.
You just see a black strip
on the floor. On the floor. Yeah. And you flip and you turn and you go back and do it again. So it's like, you don't go anywhere. But it was really fun to train for that. And I think that was one of those things to where And then when it came time to like feel really good going into even the half Ironman, I felt really locked in terms of my like, hey, I know that like I'm not going to drown out here in this open water. I think every triathlete would agree that like open water is always just this, it's a different beast than in the pool. Like, I mean, it's truly different. And the feel is 100% different. You're typically wearing a wetsuit. Most people aren't used to wearing a wetsuit. So a lot of people struggle.
Those help you
stay more buoyant. Yep.
How much of a, do you notice the difference with that?
It
do you
does.
put it on and get in the water, you're like, wow,
Yes.
I feel like I'm wearing floaties? Or,
Yeah, it does feel it feels very different. And I would say that like the full wetsuit feels entirely different. I've done ones where it's just like the sleeveless and that doesn't feel quite the same. But when you get the full wetsuit, that makes all the difference in the world.
do the wetsuits do any like thermal regulation? Because I feel like I see people swimming and it's like 50, 60 degrees out. I'm like, that water's got to be... And people are like, oh, I'm wearing a wetsuit. I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. It's like Titanic water. So does it do any...
Yeah. I'm sure some of them do. That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
But one of the things that like as a general rule of thumb that like for an open water swim, you shouldn't be swimming in open water that's less than like 60-degree temperature, because otherwise even at 60 degrees, that's like the minimum you should be swimming, because that's like the lowest, that's the coldest the water you should be swimming in, because it's just truly freezing. So
Yeah.
it's really cool, but it's always difficult because for most triathletes, it's like, especially in places like the Midwest where it's like, you can't open water swim in the winter, or
Yeah.
even arguably for the first, for the spring, it's like you have to wait almost till the summer because the water's just too cold to swim outside. So, and that's where a lot of athletes, it's like when they get time for the event, when it comes time to the swim, they're like, I haven't practiced a lot of open water swimming. And so they get real nervous. And that's where it's like, you can start separating yourself in triathlons just by simply practicing more open water swims than other athletes ever do. And so, but it was fun. I mean, the full Chattanooga, I would say that like one of those experiences that it was a 10 out of 10. And it was one of those things to where I remember like I feel that thing so well, but during the run is where I just started struggling. Like it was like mile six, and I was just like, my legs are dead. I had already spent 7+ hours going into the marathon, and it was just like, you're just like, man, I am absolutely gassed here. But I, threw up a couple times, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna finish this thing, and I'm just gonna do whatever it takes to get through this. And I was happy to finish. I was really excited for it. It was such a benchmark to like, cool, this is awesome to do. But I think for me, one of those things to where I, kind of fast forwarding even to, where I'm at right now, where it's like, even this past year where it's like I signed up for 2 half Ironmans, and I was, excited to continue to kind of do the triathlon thing. But we ended up having like an infant that was born like a couple weeks before these 2 half Ironmans. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to do these things because I'd have to be away for a few days. And my wife was like, you are absolutely not going for 3 days when we got a baby at home. So ended up doing like a half just marathon, and then I did a full marathon in the fall this past year. And it was really fun. But for me, I kind of got back into where I was like, especially as I did a lot more running in 2024, I started to get this itch. I was like, you know what? I love cycling so much, and I just need to get back to my true love, and that's where it got interesting to me to be like, you know what, instead of being okay or decent at like 3 different things, I want to be really good at one thing, and one thing I really love. So to me, it was going back to that idea of like, the guys that race and guys that we know, that you're just like, man, that'd be fun to do. It'd be fun to just push myself to the limits and see what's possible. So I'm excited because, even when I bought the Tarmac, which you and Derek were instrumental in helping me get this bike, it's like, this Pearl, I affectionately call her Pearl, she can't just be sitting in the basement. It's like she's screaming like, hey, what are you doing? You're running, and you've got this beautiful machine sitting downstairs just waiting to be rode. So, but for me, that's kind of my journey with cycling.
So let me ask you this. I got a couple of try questions I want to ask you real quick.
Yep.
So would you say between the 3, if you were to rank yourself from best to worst in the 3 disciplines, would you say it was cycling, running, swimming?
Well, I would say honestly, in terms of like swimming, I became a good swimmer, like not an amazing fast swimmer, but it depends on, it depends on how you define good. Because to me, like a really good runner.
Well, that was my next question
Yeah.
what I don't know about swimming. So the other two disciplines, I understand units of measurement.
Yeah.
So with running, it's pretty much always been, at least it was when I was a runner, your mile time.
Yep.
Any distance you're doing, what's your mile pace?
Yep.
Cycling, it's all around your power, your threshold, because running, if you run a 5:30 mile,
Yep.
and if the guy next to you isn't capable of running a 5:30, you're going to just outlast him. You're going to just run away from him. Cycling, because there's drafting and race dynamics like that, that's not really a measurement. It's just power. Can you eventually get in a position where you could potentially hold more power than someone? What is it for swimming? What's the unit to determine?
Yeah, it's usually by your 100 meters in
Okay.
terms of like kind of your average. So like if you look at it on like a Strava, if you like I have a friend or somebody swimming, usually really, I would say really fast swimmers can consistently swim fast in that like minute 20s, somewhere in that range. Those are like guys or gals that you're just like, yeah, you've got like, you can swim faster than most people.
For 100 meters, so a minute and
Yep.
20.
On average, that's
what's
like...
what's an Olympian, just to give me a frame of reference in my mind? I
like
know
a
we're
pro
not,
athlete?
Yeah, let's say
they
a
would
pro
be
or-
probably in the low minutes. They would be
Okay.
like, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they would be kind of in that like 110 to 115 mark, per
Okay.
100 meters. So it's like they...
And then like a Phelps is going to be like a sub 110?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
even know what his would be. His would be, I mean, in terms of just the only pro triathletes I know, and they'd probably, some of them would swim faster, but it all depends on your distance too, because it's like if you're swimming a 1 minute 20, 100 meter per minute pace in a full Ironman, that's 2.4 miles of swimming. And it's like, that's incredible. That's really, really fast for a very long time. So, where guys could pull that off in like a sprint triathlon, it's like, yeah, it's great, but you're only swimming half mile. If you can pull that off for like, almost 2.5 miles, it's incredible. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I was in like the 130s-ish.
Okay.
So that's where I was like, probably better.
But you can
yeah.
hold that for a while.
Yeah.
And because you did a full, so that's a 2.5?
A 2.4. Yep.
2.4 miles. How many kilometers? What is that, like 4 kilometers?
Almost 4.
Okay.
Yep.
You know what I noticed about the events? When you do, so there's sprint, Olympic, half, and full. The bike and the run both double,
Yep.
except the swim doesn't.
Yeah.
There's
That's true.
like the Olympic is 1.5 kilometers or 0.9 miles, and then the half is 1.9 kilometers or 1.2 miles. Whereas
Yep.
every other distance,
It like jumps.
you go, cycling is 20K, 40K, 90, and then 180. Running is 5, 10, 21, and 42K.
Yeah.
So it's like they all double except the swimming.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I don't know why that is, but I wonder from like, I mean, even just swimming like a half mile, like it's roughly like 700 meters, 750 meters in the pool. It goes by real quick. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of it too.
I
where
mean,
it's like,
for you it
yeah,
would.
yeah. I think from a lot of guys and girls out there, but yeah, it's one of those things to where, yeah, from that distance perspective, but a mile swim in the pool for a half iron, like 1.2, it does take, it takes a little bit. So, you're got to do a couple of loops.
My son's teacher is a triathlete, and I was asking her a bunch of questions. She's like, "You think you're gonna get into this?" And I was like, "No." I don't miss running. And then when I was younger, I was a lifeguard, and to get our paychecks, we had to swim 12 laps to get our paycheck. And
I love that.
I would get to like
Okay.
lap 8 and be like, if I don't get paid, it's okay. That's what I was thinking. I was so bad at swimming.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a lifeguard, I could save people, but just
Yeah.
like continuous swimming of laps, I was like,
Yeah.
this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to drown and whatever.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick. I
Yeah.
got 2 quick questions. So you were mentioning the tri-bike. So I want to, and we'll probably get into this in a later episode, I definitely want to try a time trial.
Yes.
Same. What's the handling? Is it scary going from a regular road bike? Because people get on a regular road
Yep.
bike that have been on mountain bikes and be like, the handling is so weird.
Yeah.
The bars are curved. I'm thinking, no, a tri-bike when you're just resting on the elbows. That to me seems
It took me a couple of times, honestly. I remember my first got out and rode my tri bike. It was, I remember texting our buddy Derek, and I was just like, dude, this thing is so wonky.
Yeah.
It just felt so different because you're tucked in an aero position, and the bike is, unlike a road bike where you're more sitting upright. I mean, obviously you want to be aero, racing and stuff, but it's more of like you're naturally just going to sit upright. But on the tri bike, it doesn't feel as natural to sit upright. The bike is just designed to be forward. So it took me a couple of times to really get used to it. And I would say, honestly, it probably took like really a month or two to feel really comfortable, like completely where I'm like turning, slowing down. Just the shifting in itself was different. Being on the aero bars themselves was a different beast. But you do get used to it. And then once you do, yeah, it's incredible.
You just feel like you're on a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
I know it's funny. You didn't do any plug for my bike last week. So spoiler,
right.
we actually have almost the same
bike.
So I'm gonna put a picture
I was
up.
Inspired by your
I'm gonna put a picture up and make the audience guess whose bike is who. Because we have a couple of our bikes side by side.
Yep.
And they're like we can tell the differences.
Yeah.
But someone might look and be like, there is no difference in those.
That's right.
But we are both on white tarmac SL7s.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, dude, I'm really glad. Like, it's fun. I find people that get into triathletes so fascinating, but I'm excited that we're both kind of trying to do this cycling thing.
Yep.
More intense.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when you were saying last week you're like excited to race with me, I'm going to be honest, like I'm not as excited about racing with you. I'm more excited to have someone to train with in the summer because you are one of the most disciplined people I know as far as waking up at the butt crack of dawn and just hammering out a training session. So like I really struggle to get up early.
Yep.
I've been on a 7-day streak of early for me. What I consider anything between 5:30 and 6:30 wake up early.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for the summer because I'm like, if I get up and if I can make it to the Ohio River, I know Josh will be up. So
that's right.
I'm hoping that some of these long Zone 2 rides in the summer, when I'm able to get up every day and get outside, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Having someone to train with.
I mean, I have to. I've got little kids at home. Like, I can't get away. But, it's like, it'd be tough to do it after work because it's like I'm just taking time away from kiddos or even time away from my wife. So,
I know. I'm usually a night out rider. Like, I'll hop on at like 9, sometimes 10 o'clock.
That's insane.
And just do like, I got intervals. I'm just going to go to bed. And like, people are like, why? And I'm like, because it just works for me.
It's crazy.
But, so that's what I'm excited about is having someone to train with.
Yep.
We should get some kit.
We should. That'd be pretty sweet.
Like custom kit.
Yeah.
And that'd be cool.
That'd be sweet.
Awesome.
I love it.
All right. Where are we at here? So I'm super glad that you shared. I'm really excited to train with you. We are going to, and you've been really good at this. You've been putting like training videos up pretty much every day, like reels on Instagram and TikTok and on YouTube now too. I've seen them hitting on YouTube on our channel. So if you're interested in seeing Josh kind of suffer in the mornings but also you've been doing a really good job of not just showing, here's me riding a Zone 2, but you really have been doing some awesome topics.
Yep.
You've covered a rest day. You've covered some weightlifting stuff. You've covered different types of intervals. You've covered some Zone 2 training and the effects that it has on your body. And what I love is like they're all in a real format. So they're super informative but short. So if you're curious to see those, you can find those on our YouTube channel. You can find them on our TikTok channel. You can find them on our Instagram. So go ahead and subscribe to those because we're trying to help grow our channel and that helps us. Week 3 next week, we're going to be getting into our actual goals. There's a lot we're going to unpack with that. Season goals. We're going to be talking about training goals with that and kind of how our training's been going because by that point we will have been training under very regimented training for almost coming up on a month. So kind of our overall take on the training that we're doing, we're going to be getting into that next week. So we're very excited to start getting into some content.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's going to be a blast. Well, and we want to hear from you guys. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to be talking, we're going to be diving into that next week, but we want to know from you guys as you're thinking about this year, what events, what races, what goals do you have? Which ones are you really excited about? And then we'd love to even hear from you. How do you approach even your goal setting in races? We'd love to hear from you guys. And we'd love to do a little bit of Q&A next week. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you guys next week.
See you next week.